Gentlemen, welcome to the regular meeting of Los Angeles City Council's Planning and Land Use Management Committee. My name is Marquis Aristos, and I'm chair of this committee, joined by council members Smith, Blumenfeld, and Cedillo. We will begin our business today, Mr. Mejia, with our items on consent. It should be item number 6. Could read that into the record. And
Councilman, this is a report from the North Valley APC. It's a draft ordinance that effectuates a building line removal along Plummer Street and CD6, and it'll construct 36 detached condominiums.
Excellent. So without objection, we'll take that item on consent, and then we have items to be continued until June 18th. I believe there are 2 items, items number 2 and 3.
That's correct, Councilman.
Excellent. That'll be the order. And then item number 4 to be continued until April 30, 2019.
That's correct.
Excellent. Do we have a report from our planning department for item number 1? All right. We'll continue item number 1 until our next meeting. And then we'll go to general public comment, of which we have 7 people that have signed up for multiple items. We'll give those people each 2 minutes each to speak on any topic in the jurisdiction of this committee. So I'll call you up and you'll have 2 minutes. Steve Lycon or Licon. Karen Bass, Bo Quanter, Red Chief, Herman, I know, right?
Los Angeles not tear it down. And I find the construction of development over-exceeding its population. It's time that we put our foot to the necks of these developers and demand that they pay back for all the criminal activity of stealing public funds under bonds and grants. And for the record, Mr. Chair, we cannot tolerate this type of inappropriate behavior. We cannot have developers paying us to do business, as Jose Huizar has done with the FBI investigation at Salesian Bishop Vermont Catholic School for money laundering. Money laundering is very offensive to a white nigger like me. After all, I pay your dues. And I'm not going to tolerate bullshit, fuck shit, and asshole shit from a nigger like you. So get your shit together, Dawson. Fuck you.
You had an additional minute.
So, everyone of Los Angeles, Angelinos, there is no affordable housing. There is nothing affordable.
I think you are.
We need sanctuary cities to come here. I called Congress demanding that the buses roll out and pick up these fucking wetbacks and bring them to the sanctuary cities. I called Jimmy Gomez's office in Washington. I called Kamala Harris' office in Washington. I called all these cunt bitches in Congress to bring the buses and bring all the so-called activity of immigration to sanctuary cities. Because that's what developers want. More fucking wetbacks like Jose Huizar and his Zacateca family exploiting us for money laundering and corruption.
Encino from Wayne.
Ask the city attorney, please.
So Mr. Herman at least was thrown out this morning. Do we have a record if Wayne was thrown out this morning?
I do not. Does the clerk have any record of that? Let me look into that with the GSD staff.
So, me, fool? So, what we got here? The bald-head fool continuing on. And that's why Greg Smith understand why we call him Daddy Pooh down on 81st Street and in Manchester last night. We call Daddy and we say, Daddy, and he says, yes. You're going to continue all these projects for further blackmail and extortion and bribes because there ain't enough money running around here. The FBI shutting this shit down soon. Greg's got to get his pension. Mark Curran's got to get his pension. Bob's got to get his pension. But Mr. Cedillo refuses to take any payoff money. What is wrong with Gil Cedillo not taking any of this free cash? Look at this. They all here with the suits and the ties and the pretty ladies. They here to give you free money, fool. Yeah. And then the 1 minute public comment period has now commenced the destruction of life itself. So what do we got here? We got this old white man who works for the old Paul Koretz. And he half dead. You know that. He can't even walk. That's what the problem is. His deputy can barely walk. His feet are all swollen up. And what are we doing here? We got to get the cash. And that's what it is. It's like you see Gil Cedillo and the plausible deniability going on because he didn't even listen. And he turned his hearing aid off and he goes, I listen. But Greg Smith has now proclaimed himself the rightful daddy of Marquise Harris Dawson, the love child, along with Jed Perry, his real mama. So let's get down there, down to 81st Street, and let's go back there and put another couple of $1 million in the hood, fool, and CDA. Fuck the white people and fuck the police, motherfuckers. Thank you.
Item number 5.
Item 5, Councilman. This is a report from the Planning Commission as it relates to an appeal by Keith Nakata. He's appealing the vesting track map that was approved for the project located in CD5 for a 26-unit condominium project.
Thank you. And that closes general public comment, so we won't take any more cards on that. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jordan Turner. I'm the Deputy Advisory Agency for this case. And with me today is our Senior City Planner, Nick Henderson, and our Project Planner for the case, Nick Ayers, who will provide some background and go over the appeal points of the project.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Nick Ayers with the Department of City Planning. I'm the project planner for the case before you, which is an appeal of a vesting tentative tract map approval for the subdivision of 26 residential condominiums at 714 to 718 North Sweetser Avenue in Council District 5. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the history of the site and the project. The project site was previously developed with 14 residential units. In December of 2014, the applicant, Etco Homes, applied for a density bonus case to allow for the construction of 26 residential units, including 2 very low-income housing units on the project site. This case was ultimately approved, and its Class 32 infill development categorical exemption was adopted in December of 2016. Concurrently with the density bonus application, the applicant received approval from the Department of Housing and Community Investment in June 2016 for the removal of the previously existing residential units. On May 10th, 2018, the applicant filed an application for a vesting tentative tract map for the creation of 26 residential condominiums. The advisory agency approved the vesting tentative tract map and adopted a Class 32 categorical exemption on January 11th, 2019. This decision was subsequently appealed to the Central Area Planning Commission, which in turn denied the appeal and sustained the decision of the advisory agency. Before you today is an appeal of the Central Area Planning Commission's decision. The appeal was filed with 3 main appeal points. 1, incompatibility with the general plan due to concerns with the loss of RSO units. 2, appropriateness of the adopted Class 32 categorical exemption. And 3, waiving of a requested alley dedication. In response to Appeal Point 1, staff contends that the appellant's points are not relevant because the map conforms to the underlying zone of the property, which means it conforms to the general plan according to the Subdivision Map Act. All the appropriate findings were made. Furthermore, the removal of the previously existing residential units subject to the rent stabilization ordinance was reviewed and approved by HCID on June 22nd, 2016. In response to Appeal Point 2, Both the advisory agency and the Central Area Planning Commission found that the project meets all the criteria for a Class 32 categorical exemption, and none of the exceptions to the categorical exemptions apply. Furthermore, the construction of the 26-unit building was considered in the previously adopted Class 32 categorical exemption as part of the density bonus case. And third, Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 1703-A authorizes the Deputy Advisory Agency to include or omit, in whole or in part, reports the recommendations of other city departments, including the Bureau of Engineering. At the public hearing on November 6, 2018, the Deputy Advisory Agency and the Bureau of Engineering representative discussed waiving the requested alley dedication. The representative of the Bureau of Engineering stated that they would find the omission of the recommended dedication acceptable. The Deputy Advisory Agency concurred and admitted the conditions related to the alley widening from the letter of determination. Therefore, the applicant is not deviating from any required standings for easements along the alley. In conclusion, staff recommends that you deny the appeal, and we'll be here to answer any questions should you have them.
Thank you so much. We have a representative from District 5 that is going to speak to us, Mr. Bickhart.
Thank you, Jim Bickhart from Council District 5. I've passed out copies of my testimony to you all. The city clerk did so before the meeting. Councilmember Koretz has asked me to appear today in support of the appeal before you in this case. There are several principles involved in this appeal that bring to mind the old adage, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. This applies to several aspects of this case. The Deputy Advisory Agency interpreted the code in such a manner as to approve the vesting tentative track map request, but the code does not mandate that the agency or Plum or the full City Council do so. Much of the thrust of the appellant's contentions point to the unintended consequences of the Planning Department's seemingly freewheeling embrace of the concept of early start condo conversions. The council member considers any project with a permit to build rental units that is looking for a subdivision to be a conversion. If somebody wants to do a subdivision from the get-go, they should apply for it from the get-go. To put it bluntly, early starts could be characterized as an invitation to displace tenants from affordable and or RSO units and do an end run around the various provisions of the municipal code and the State Ellis Act in the process. Early start conversions contribute to the exacerbated cumulative effects in several ways, which suggests that the City Council should really reconsider whether continuing along this path is consistent with the policies of the housing element, advocating for provision and preservation of housing affordable to people at all income levels, and thus the best interests of the city. And to be sure, Councilmember Koretz is working on a proposal which could address the matter in a definitive fashion. That being said, this application raises relevant issues. One, as is sometimes the case with other early starts, this application takes advantage of a waiver of setbacks and dedications that applying for a tract map in the first place would require. In the case of an early start, the Deputy Advisory Agency has the ability to grant such waivers on the grounds of hardship. But let's face it, the hardship is self-imposed because the applicant pulled the permit for rental units that aren't required to do the dedications and now wants to convert to condos that are. What's the point of having such requirements if they can be circumvented through a sleight of hand maneuver? Additionally, as the appellant and others have argued, the project takes up nearly half a block, so the loss of the dedication is not inconsiderable. Allowing this waiver will, for the foreseeable future, make it impossible to widen an alley to the city's full 20-foot standard that is heavily used by trucks servicing commercial businesses on its other side. This waiver was only granted because of the early start and will have long-term negative effects. The subdivision arguably is inconsistent with both the Hollywood Community Plan's Objective 3 and the General Plan Framework's Housing Element Goal Number 1, both of which seem deliberately ambiguous when it comes to the tension between preserving existing housing and encouraging new development. But in different words, they both call for preservation and provision for housing for people at all income levels, including non-subsidized affordable housing, what we now call naturally occurring affordable housing. It is just as valid to rely upon that policy as it is to rely upon its flip side, which promotes new development. Conversions such as this one remove such units and replaces them with costly for-sale units, and the council member feels that both the letter and especially the spirit of the plans are being violated. Councilmember Koretz also finds the appellant's contention that once the application is determined to be inconsistent with the plans, it is no longer eligible for a categorical exemption to be a valid argument. Additionally, such early starts as this one facilitate the wholesale replacement of aforementioned naturally occurring affordable, often rent-stabilized housing with for-sale units that are not subject to Ellis Act and RSO requirements for how former tenants and future rent levels are treated. This amounts to circumvention of hard-won tenant protections that we can ill afford to ignore. The city should not be in the business of sanctioning the deprivation of tenant rights, whether it's being done intentionally or not. More specifically, the approved project with this onto which this conversion is being placed blatantly removes rent-stabilized units, utilizes the old SB 1818 state density bonus, which allows higher height and density and requires 2 affordable units, and then blows it all away with a shrug by this subdivision. So we're talking about maximum loss of naturally occurring affordable units replaced with condominiums that the vast majority of current residents of Los Angeles cannot afford to purchase. We're told that the 2 affordable units will be owned by the condo association and rented out per statute, but seriously, the council member will believe that when he sees it. Given that the state legislature has subsequently approved an even more rigorous set of replacement requirements in SB 2222, condominiums couldn't possibly be keeping with its intentions. The case also raises the question of how cumulative impact for condo conversions, as currently defined in the code, applies to this condo conversion and other early start cases. Section 12.95.2.f.6 of the LA Municipal Code provides that the Deputy Advisory Agency with the latitude to turn down any tract or parcel map if the surrounding neighborhood's apartment vacancy rate is below 5%, which this neighborhood's was at some point in 2018. Unfortunately, the council member doesn't know the current figure, and the issue appears not to have been considered by city planning at any stage of this case. It also provides that the agency should be able to find that the cumulative effect of rental housing market in the planning area of successive residential or residential to commercial industrial conversion projects, past, present, and future, is not significant. It goes on to list several considerations, the last and most flexible of which is, quote, any other factors pertinent to the determination. If we look at this, at what this project applicant is doing within a several block radius of 714 to 718 Sweetser, we find that the same company is doing exactly the same thing, that is early start conversions, on other properties to the extent that some 98 rent-stabilized apartment units are being or have been lost forever to early starts. Taking the whole neighborhood into account, that number becomes 139, and that doesn't even consider units lost to redevelopment. Councilmember Koretz considers that to be a clear example of any other factor pertinent to a finding of significant cumulative impact. Sadly, the Deputy Advisory Agency appears to have ignored the code section and publicly cited CEQA as its arbiter of cumulative impact, which the council members thinks is improper, if not irresponsible. That end result should be part of your reckoning today. At what point does losing 98 units in a couple of blocks become a significant impact? The tract map approval doesn't address the matter and makes no findings about it. Councilmember Koretz thinks the answer is that it's a problem now. Finally, there's the other matter of what public benefit is associated with this conversion and others like it that justifies the waiving of requirements the city normally applies to building condominiums or to replacing rent-stabilized units with new rental or for-sale units. We live in a city that is woefully short of affordable housing options and in which most residents can no longer afford even entry-level ownership housing. In a situation where the outcome is removing affordability and replacing it with unaffordability, Councilmember Koretz is hard-pressed to see any actual public benefit. Consequently, on his behalf, I urge you to approve this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the appellant, Mr. Nakata. You have 5 minutes total to speak.
Thank you. Keith Nakata, the appellant. I've submitted a letter and some exhibits to provide you with more detail in addition to my comments today. In 2018, 5.5 units of rent-stabilized ordinance or RSO housing were lost each and every day, totaling 2,007 for the year in Los Angeles, according to the Coalition for Economic Survival. Between the years 2001 and 2018, 24,903 units of RSO housing were lost. On 2 blocks in my neighborhood, Edco Homes has targeted, swooped in, and purchased 16 lots of all naturally occurring RSO housing and has evicted all the tenants in the 73 RSO units, demolished almost all the buildings, applied for over-the-counter building and safety building permits for the apartments, and then at the very end, applied for an expedited condo conversion tract map long after the evicted tenants have been cast to the winds. The project on this site, case number DIR 2014-4762, issued in September 2016, was for an apartment building. Today, we are considering a tract map for condominiums, which will not allow for the evicted tenants the right to return and will result in the loss of 14 RSO units. Because it removes RSO housing from the Hollywood community, the project is also incompatible with the city's general plan framework element, housing element, which provides under policy 1.2.2, encourage and incentivize the preservation of affordable units to ensure that demolitions and conversions do not result in the net loss of the city's stock of decent, safe, and healthy or affordable housing. Violation of the general plan means that the Subdivision Map Act findings cannot be made, as reflected on page 20 of the letter of determination. These findings are the proposed map will be consistent with the applicable general and specific plans, and the design and improvement of the proposed subdivision are consistent with the applicable general plans. The project violation of the general plan is not merely a ground for denying the project outright under the Subdivision Map Act, it also is grounds for denying the use of the Class 32 categorical exemption under CEQA. Without the application of this categorical exemption, the project would be subject to full environmental review under CEQA. The Class 32 exemption, also known as infill exemption, is only available for projects which are in strict compliance with both the general plan and the zoning. Accordingly, specific findings must be made about such compliance, including the following finding reflected on page 15 of the letter of determination. The project is consistent with applicable general plan designation and all applicable general plan policies, as well as applicable zoning designations and regulations. Please refer to the substitute findings submitted to the council file on April 15th, 2019. The council should restore the alley dedication recommended by the Bureau of Engineering. The City of Los Angeles is entitled to and should restore the 2.5-foot alley dedication condition recommended by the Bureau of Engineering, and should find that because the tract map does not include the dedication, it's inconsistent with the city's general plan and should deny the tract map on this basis. The alley along the southern edge of the project, parallel to Melrose Avenue, is substandard 15 feet in width, which is insufficient for access, including for emergency vehicles. Such substandard alleys are common throughout the city, especially in the 5th District, where, as here, the alley marks the border between commercial and residential zones. The congestion is particularly acute. In order to rectify the situation, it has been long been the policy of the city to require new development to dedicate and improve sufficient additional area to provide for the 20-foot width by requiring the owners on each side of the alley to dedicate a full 10 feet. Over time, this results in a standard 20-foot alley width. Please look at the exhibit under complete streets that shows the alley width. The DA omitted the condition from the final letter of the determination. The grounds for doing so was never explained or even mentioned. Instead, the grounds for admitting the condition were offered for the first time in the appeal analysis submitted to Plum Committee on April 11th. Directly to the south across the alley is a commercial property located at 8275, which is being developed as a three-story commercial building built in 1963. Dedication of the 2.5 feet along the southern edge of the property would allow the alley to be widened to 17.5 feet for a linear distance of 180 feet, beginning at Sweetser and continuing for 180 continuous feet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll hear from the applicant, Mr. Brower. That's your last warning, Mr. Spindler.
Good afternoon, Neil Brower for the applicant Hedco Homes. I think first and most fundamentally, the findings that both Council District 5 and that the appellant are asking you to make are based on a massive misperception and based on the citation to law that simply doesn't apply here. First, the idea that the map itself is what eliminates the rent-stabilized units and the right of return for tenants that were previously evicted is wrong. The rent stabilization ordinance, the portion that they cite, 151.26, refers to the re-rental of existing units after you've sent the tenants away. That is, if I evict and then re-rent that unit, the tenant then has a right of return at the rental rate that they were paying when I evicted them. The proper section that applies here is section 151.28, which applies to replacement units and provides that replacement apartment units built on a site that tenants were previously evicted from are not subject to a right of return and are not subject to the rent that they paid at the time of eviction. Rather, rent can be set at market, and although the building itself becomes rent stabilized and the increases year to year become limited according to the rent stabilization ordinance, those are market rate units. Secondly, the claim that the map itself is inconsistent with the general plan is based on a misreading of the land development provisions in the municipal code as well. Section 17.05B of the municipal code refers to general plan conformance within the context of tentative maps, and it refers to the design standards and densities and zoning conformance of the map itself. The city's discretion when considering a tentative map is limited. It's not unlimited and not subject to necessarily as broad policy considerations as the council office and as the appellants would urge. Regarding early start, the building did not use early start, and early start has a very specific technical meaning, and that is the issuance of a permit for a foundation before you've pulled building permits for the building itself. Also, this is not a condominium conversion. I realize that CD5 and the appellants would like to characterize this as such, but condominium conversions also are very specific and refer to the conversion of an existing building with existing rental units to for sale units. This is demolition and construction of entirely new dwelling units, and hence the different provisions of the rent stabilization ordinance that apply. The permits for this building have been validly issued. The building is well under construction, and the absolute right, and the tenant now has, or tenant, Edco now has the absolute right to complete the building. In terms of the dedication of the alley, I think I heard from CD5 that this was a hardship exemption. I want to stress that that isn't true, that the land development provisions of the code specifically give the Deputy Advisory Agency the authority to waive based on reports received from the Bureau of Engineering and the Department of Public Works, among other agencies. Here, the Department of Public Works specifically considered the waiver request within the context of development that was likely to occur and development that already had occurred, and recommended not dedicating the 2.5 feet on that basis. Furthermore, even if the map is declined, the dedication of the alley would not need to occur. The only reason it needs to occur is for conformance with the street plan, which is a required element of a map under the land development provisions. The loss of RSO units, as I mentioned earlier, has already occurred. The map is not what drives that, and denying the map on that basis is clear error and a contravention of law and a contravention of the Housing Accountability Act. I understand that additional findings that the appellant provided you purported to state that the Housing Accountability Act doesn't apply here because this isn't somehow a development project, but the the definition of disapprove a housing development project under the Housing Accountability Act says, including any required land use approvals or entitlements. This is a land use approval or entitlement required for the construction of condominiums and for the finalization of this building. Regarding CEQA and the Class 32 categorical exemption, the project is clearly within the limits and the objective standards set by the zone and by the general plan itself. And the density bonus, the fact that there's additional units or additional relief provided on the basis of the density bonus, is an illegal basis for finding otherwise. Thank you very much, and I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you so much. We have public comment speakers on this. Stephen Luffman, Amy Gallaudet, Susie Witten, Dale Kendall.
Good afternoon. Stephen Luftman. Every day, over 5 families are losing their homes to the Ellis Act. Over 4 years ago, I was one of those. I lost my home for building luxury condominiums. A developer could build multi-million-dollar luxury condominiums. There is no shortage of luxury condominiums in Los Angeles. I urge you to support this appeal so that these buildings could remain RSO apartments and regulated by the City of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amy Gallaudet. I belong to 4 or 5 homeowner associations because of the property I own in different areas. We are aghast at what the developers and their lobbyists have accomplished. They are like a big suction pump that's sucking the life out of the neighborhoods and affordable housing. Who can afford to live in $1 million condo? Only the rich. And most are rented out by Airbnbs. I know that for a fact because they're in my neighborhood. Their workers are not even afforded protective gear. We need to have a middle class. A hive cannot afford to have all queens. We need to have workers also. Please, please, do not let affordable housing be turned into condos. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susie Witten, and I'm a tenant. And actually, I'm a tenant right now of Etco. My building is slated for demolition in the next couple of months. I have to be out by July 1st. When Etco first bought my building last summer, I looked them up online and I saw the Sweetser project that was being written about, and it was described as rental units. And subsequently I thought, well, you know, if I have to leave eventually, I will ask for, you know, them to accommodate me maybe in this new building. Then I learned that it was being converted to condos, which are totally unaffordable. On my street, there's already a huge condo complex that they're building across the street, and on where I live, it's going to be one of, I think, 5 buildings spanning from Croft over to Alfred along the alley. And
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Dale Kendall. I'm asking you to please help save the middle class. They're taking away rent-stabilized apartments so fast. The people are Ellised out of their apartments. They have nowhere to go. And we reward developers. I'm asking you not to reward this developer who abuses the system by finding loopholes. We're losing rent-stabilized apartments quicker than anyone would have imagined. People are abusing the system, and it's our job to watch them and make sure that they go by the rules. Please, please do not grant this tract map.
Christine Ronhell, John Henning, Bill Watkins, Steve Mayer.
Good afternoon. Christine Rangel with the Building Industry Association. I am here today to express our support for this project. We became involved when we found out that the project had already been approved several times and that it was just being held up at this point due to this. We're asking that you deny the appeal based on the fact that this is going to be precedent setting if the appeal goes through. Developers need certainty in the market. That's what helps them to decide to do a project. And if there's no certainty, if you don't know if your project is going to be denied at the last minute, even after it's been approved several times, this is very problematic for certainty in the industry and increases the cost to housing for everyone. So we ask that you deny this appeal. Thank you.
Hello. Shall I start?
Yes.
My name is John Henning, and I support the appeal. This project has not been approved many times. This is the first time this project has been before the city. This project is a condo map. This is the first time a tract map has been before the city. It's gone through various levels of appeal, but it hasn't been approved multiple times in the past. There's a one-page document in your packet that you would have received today that explains why the Housing Accountability Act does not apply here. The applicant, for purposes of trying to establish that the project has no environmental impacts, emphasizes that this is only a conversion of apartments into condominium units. They can't have it both ways. They can't say it's only a conversion for purposes of CEQA, and then when it comes to the Housing Accountability Act, say that it's a development project. It's not even a development project. It is a condo map.
Thank you. That's your time.
Honorable Chair and council members, my name is Steve Mayer. I'm a renter. I live in an RSO or in rent-stabilized housing. Any reduction of RSO housing should be avoided at all costs. This is simply, in this case, a matter of the developer will be making less money by just having an apartment versus a condo. I urge you to make certain that it's an apartment, not a condo. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment speakers. Staff, throwing it back to you to make comments on the various testimonies that we heard over the last 25 minutes.
Nick Ayers with the Department of City Planning. I want to emphasize 2 points. First, in regards to the speaker stating that for the CEQA approval, we were stating it was just a map and a conversion. We were not stating that. We were saying the physical impacts that are required to be considered under CEQA were already discussed and found to be not significant with the previous Type 32 that was adopted along with the density bonus. Second is, just by the definition of our code, this is not a residential to residential condominium conversion that requires an existing building with an active certificate of occupancy. The previous building was demolished. The new building is under construction. No C of O has been issued for that. Therefore, it is not a conversion.
Also, Nick Hendricks, senior city planner. Just wanted to add on to that conversation. Remember, these are affordable units that were created under the density bonus program, and the RSO units that were removed previously are not affordable units. So we have two components here. We have previous apartment building that was demoed, oversawn by HCID. Then there was the creation of affordable units in the density bonus project, and the map that is now being applied is just making those units to be available for occupancy for ownership. That's the only difference here.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item? We've been joined by Councilmember Price for a full complement of members. Mr. Blumenfeld.
Thank you. Wanted to ask the step at the setback issue. In Mr. Koretz's letter is saying that basically it was a sleight of hand. If they had gone with a regular apartment, they would have had to do the setbacks. But by switching at the last minute, they're avoiding the setback through a sleight of hand maneuver. Do you agree with that? Or what?
Jordan Turner, Deputy Advisory Agency. The project was approved under the density bonus ordinance in about 2016 or so. That provision allowed various deviations from our code. I believe an increase in height, an increase of floor area ratio, and I believe also a decrease in one of the setbacks. So either way, if the project was coming as a condo or as a density bonus project, they could avail themselves of the density bonus ordinance
But if
and
it
the
came
waivers.
straight as a condo, would they have had to do the setback?
If it was just a condo map without the density bonus provisions, then they would have to abide by the underlying zone. Through the density bonus ordinance, they are allowed to deviate from certain provisions of the underlying zone.
If I may, Nick Hendricks. The advisory agency has the authority to determine if dedication and widening or street improvement requirements are necessary for that, for the project. In this case, the advisory agency, in concert with Bureau of Engineering and other contributing members of the subdivision committee, determined that the improvements of the site were not necessary as originally proposed. Engineering weighed in on this decision, and there was a discussion at the advisory agency hearing. The waiver was originally submitted because they were not associated with a map. Because a map became part of the project, the map under the advisory agency's authority has the ability to determine if the dedications and or any other improvements are necessary for that particular circumstance. And in this particular circumstance, the advisory agency, based on the recommendations and discussions with Bureau of Engineering, determined that they were not necessary.
And they would have done the same thing if it had gone straight out as a condo?
If it were an apartment, actually apartments are not required to do the improvements. They're required to do dedications, but they're not required to do the improvements. That's why, for example, if you travel down Moore Park Street in the valley, you'll find jagged edge streets where you'll have a section that's wider than others, and the areas in which you don't find the widening are the areas in which apartment buildings have been built.
I mean, I'm looking at the letter, and it's a sympathetic point here, which is basically saying that it started out as an apartment which didn't require the setbacks, but if it had gone in as a condo, which has more requirements, those setbacks would have been required. But it was only because the deputy advisory was granted the waiver on the grounds of a hardship, but the hardship was, as stated in the letter, was self-imposed.
Okay, so I want to make sure that the concept of what a waiver is versus yard deviations are. So waivers of dedications actually have to do with the street or an alley, which includes the area that includes sidewalks and the streets, curb and gutter, flood control systems. Yards and setbacks are those areas which, as measured from those final dedicated or improved sections, are the areas between the building and the actual property line. Under the density bonus case, they were granted certain deviations for their yard requirements, but those have no relationship to the waiver of dedication or improvements that are associated with the project.
So what do you attribute the switching from the apartment to the condo to? Well, why didn't they just come in as a straight condo?
Well, oftentimes developers may start off as intending to do rental type of product, but over a course of time, it could be economic changes, could be various circumstances. Individuals may elect to do a map. The map just adds an additional layer of standards which have no bearing or relationship with the size or shape of the building, but rather what type of dedications might be imposed as part of the approval.
All right, and if this project doesn't get built, what's the plan? What happens next?
We'll lose affordable units, and they'll just have to anybody who wishes to pursue a project on the site would have to comply with the applicable zoning, which allows the same type of project that's being proposed before you.
They come back.
All right, other questions, Mr. Steele, Mr. Smith? Mr. Price? Mr. Smith?
This project began in 2016. There was initial filing. And during that time frame to ferment, are you going to correct that?
The density bonus case was filed in December of 2014.
2014.
It was approved in December of 2016.
Okay, so since the original project project came to the city in 2014 then to today, how many different hearing points were there where decisions were made that affected this case?
Well, for the case overall, there was the original director's determination. Then there was an appeal to the City Planning Commission. So that was a public hearing. Then the map was filed. There was a hearing before the Deputy Advisory Agency, so that'd be the second, if you will, public hearing. The third was before this, an appeal before the Central Area Planning Commission, and the fourth is here today before the Plum Committee.
So over that time frame, there's been 4 public hearings, and the issues that I think Mr. Bickard brought forward, there are some really interesting concepts and a lot of theoretical discussions for sure. My concern is why are we sitting here today at the very end of this process and the project has already begun and we're hearing these kind of arguments? Should those not have been presented earlier in the debate on this rather than at the very last minute when construction's already begun? I don't understand why this very detailed argument has been brought forward at the very final end when it's almost too late to do anything about it. So, can you answer that, Jim? Yeah. Just sit from there. I can hear you if you want to. Okay.
Councilmember Koretz became concerned about this project after the tract map was applied for. He did not object to the apartment building because it would have resulted in a rent-stabilized building, albeit at higher rent levels, but it wouldn't have...
With no low-income units, right?
With two low-income units, yeah. He's concerned that the switch to a condominium creates a situation, and I would take issue with the appellant's or the applicant's attorney about the exact nature of what's required for if new rental units are built. It's my understanding that the former tenants do have the opportunity to try to come back into the units, admittedly at a higher rent level, but they are rent stabilized. And the underlying concern to all this is the preservation of rent stabilized units. And converting to condos obviously eliminates the possibility of that. So we didn't get involved.
Was that argument explained then when the project switched? Was that argument then?
Yeah, it has to do with switching from rental units to for sale units.
At the point that happened, were those arguments presented?
They were presented at the Central Area Planning Commission about 6 weeks ago. That was the first time we got involved.
All right. That concludes our comments. Anything else from planning? Nothing? All right. I'm going to move that we send this item to the full city council tomorrow without recommendation. Is there any discussion on that? Second by Mr. Blumenfeld. Any objection? Hearing that you sure?
Reluctant. Reluctantly.
So without objection, that'll be the order. So we'll send this to council without recommendation. And move on to item number 7.
This item is in council tomorrow.
Yes.
Item 7, Councilman, this is a report from the Central APC as it relates to a CEQA clearance and also an appeal filed by Maria Buenrostro from Unite Here as to the granting of that CEQA categorical exemption, and this is for a change of use from a commercial building to hotel restaurants in CD14. Only the CEQA is before you, Council.
Yes.
Good afternoon, committee members. Oliver Neprin with the Department of City Planning. So what you have before you is an appeal of a project, a CEQA appeal of a adaptive reuse project, 149 room adaptive reuse project located at 124 Olympic Boulevard in the Central City Community Plan area. The project also includes a 6,700 square foot restaurant space. This project was originally approved by the zoning administrator on August 22nd of 2018, and then appealed to the Area Planning Commission, who considered this project on November 27th, 2018, and denied the appeal of the project, thereby approving the original entitlement, case number ZA 2018-331-CUB-CUX-ZAD. So that project was then final. That project was no longer appealable. Subsequently, there was then an appeal of the CEQA environmental clearance. The project that was originally approved was approved with a Class 32 categorical exemption, which the Area Planning Commission and the Zoning Administrator considered when they approved the project originally and when they denied the appeal and approved the project, as I stated, on November 27th of 2018. So the appeal that you have before you today is substantially similar to that appeal which was before the Area Planning Commission. There are 7 points that are raised as part of that appeal. The first two are primarily involve land use issues, and they contend that there is inconsistency with the proposed project as it relates to the general plan and the zoning code. As an adaptive reuse project, the projects and the inconsistencies that are raised by the appellant are specifically allowed for under the adaptive reuse ordinance. And so therefore any of the inconsistencies that are being raised were considered as part of an adaptive reuse project and as part of the adaptive reuse ordinance, and therefore are consistent with both the zoning code and the general plan. The remaining appeal points do involve CEQA considerations and involve the air quality analysis, the noise analysis, traffic, the hazardous materials on site, as well as cumulative impacts within CEQA. As I stated, the project that was approved with a Class 32 categorical exemption. And as such, the standard of review for the city is slightly different than that, as it is with a mitigated negative declaration. In this case, we have substantial evidence which has been submitted to the record, which the city considered as part of its review, and has used that as evidence to support the Class 32 categorical exemption. The appellant has submitted other material from other experts which refutes or challenges the analysis that is before you today. The city and the planning staff believe that the analysis that we used is a substantial evidence that we will be using as part of our Class 32 exemption, and therefore would recommend that the Plum Committee and the City Council deny the appeal and sustain the action of the Zoning Administrator and the Area Planning Commission in approving the categorical exemption. If you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Thank you so much. I believe we'll hear from the applicant, the appellants first. Ms. Buenrostro and Schumann. My apologies for... It doesn't...
Good afternoon, honorable council members. My name is Jordan Sisson, here from the law office of Gideon Krakow, here representing appellants and downtown resident Antonio Mendoza, who did submit expert GHG and
Who are you
noise
representing?
companies. The appellants here.
By name?
Brunostro, as well as Natalie Schumann.
Got it.
Local
Thank
level.
you. That's good.
Appellants believe those letters speak for themselves. They're germane to the environmental issues that are part of this appeal. They're also echoed in letters submitted from other nearby residents or businesses, echoing some of the similar issues. And we are asking for this honorable committee to grant the appeal. In my limited time, I just want to highlight 4 points in the noise letter submitted. First, this project includes unusual circumstances. A, this outdoor rooftop DJ nightclub is unusual for an M-zone property. B, this is an unusual environmental setting. You have 2 very large buildings that will reflect noise and affect sensitive receptors. C, you have unusual low-frequency impacts directly caused by bass-thumping DJ music. These are unusual circumstances. This is an unusual rooftop use. My second point is that the applicant's noise study nowhere discloses how loud it's going to be when you have large crowds, when you have alcohol service, when you have amplified music, and when you have bass thumping DJ music until 2 a.m. almost any day from the approvals. Not disclosed. The third point is that the project is relying on a nondescript glass railing. There's nothing discussed about how thick it is, what sort of material it is, what sort of noise attenuating features that glass rail is going to have, but they're relying on it, despite substantial evidence in the record that there's going to be significant impacts. And fourth, the city has plenty of tools to deal with this. This is not unusual in the sense that the city does not know how to handle amplified music. They've done it in the past. The appellants here are merely requesting that the city does that pursuant to an adequate SEQA review before the project becomes a nuisance, not after. I thank you for your time. And in my last remaining moments, I'd like to introduce to you Local 11 to discuss some of their interests in this project.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. My name is Yelena Zelter. I'm here today on behalf of the hundreds of hospitality and food service workers who live and work in close proximity to the proposed project, and the 30,000 more that we represent in Southern California. Well, we're here exercising our right to petition you, the Council's Committee, on issues of land use and environmental review of the utmost importance to the lives of our members. We believe that the APC erred in approving the proposed project and granting the Class 32 categorical exemption under CEQA. By granting the exemption, the city is allowing a project that could have serious negative effects to go forward without the necessary environmental review and mitigation measures needed to protect residents and neighboring businesses from potential noise, traffic, and air quality impact. Our members and other working people who live and work in the project area are the ones who deal firsthand with the disturbances that development projects can bring to their lives. Our communities are affected first when development isn't properly studied and mitigated. We ask that you vote no on this project unless a CEQA-compliant environmental review of the project is performed and appropriate mitigation measures are ensured. Thank you.
All right, now we'll hear from our applicant representative.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I would like to, council members, I'm sorry, I'd like to share my time with my colleague. I'm Elizabeth Peterson, the applicant's representative for Jameson Properties. The appeal to the Plum Committee is an appeal from the Central Area Planning Commission's final determination. The hotel project will bring new life to the Block and the Fashion District neighborhood of downtown Los Angeles. The hotel is much desired by California Mart Center, and there's been a collaboration very carefully put together there. Mr. Chu imposed very strict conditions and adopted the categorical exemption, concluding that owing to the adaptive reuse nature of the hotel project, the CEQA issues were vetted with the Central APC and denied. We do ask you to support the categorical exemption. As for the outdoor dining, ZAI 1808 allows outdoor rooftops without a need for a variance in the M2 zone. We're very, very careful in our acoustical studies and studied this extensively. We will meet LAMC code section, which does not allow for more than a 5 decibel sound transference on the roof. We will do logs. We work very closely with LAPD on this site. We do have rooftops all over the city that do not have a noise transference. We can put sound limits on all of our sound systems, and this is not a large rooftop that will be a nightclub. It's an amenity to the hotel. The project will adhere to all of the green building codes, and the Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Planning and Land Use Committee voted in full support. The Los Angeles Police Department was very cooperative with us, worked very carefully with us, building security plans, and felt that we would make a strong presence that would make this block lighter, brighter, and safer. And once again, I do want to conclude that this is very much, the Mart really needs this for their buyers and fashion people coming into town. There's nothing in the area. And I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Andrew Brady of DLA Piper on behalf of the project applicant. Just want to address one final point, and that is a point raised by the appellant regarding what he called unusual circumstances, acting as an exception to the categorical exemption adopted by the city. It is simply not the case that there's anything unusual about a rooftop amenity deck atop a hotel downtown. As I'm sure the councilmen are aware, there are a number of approved hotels with rooftop amenity spaces downtown. We cited over 7 of them recently approved with just in the last 5 years by the city. So to claim that there is something unusual about this is simply incorrect. Beyond that, this is in the Fashion District, and as indicated in the city's noise study and a supplemental noise study submitted to the city that were reviewed by staff, and staff is determined to be substantial evidence showing that the project would not have a significant noise impact. There are substantial features of the building here. There is a glass railing, and there is a 6-story concrete parking structure between this project and the nearest residential building that will sufficiently dampen sound to determine that there would be no noise impacts. Beyond that, the city does have an enforceable noise ordinance that, if noise does get excessive, can be enforced. Staff had, as staff indicated, the city had substantial evidence to approve a Class 32 categorical exemption for the project, and nothing in any of the appeals that have been brought forward that have previously been denied by the city. There's no new arguments here today. We recommend that the committee here deny this appeal on the same basis that APC denied it, and allow this very meritorious project to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a series of public comment speakers on this item. Mr. Lincoln, Alan Schaefer, Jordan Sisson, Yelena Zeltzer, Andrew Brady. That was you? All right. Andrew Brady's spoken. Sean Hood, Carlos Bonilla, Bill Watkins.
Hi there. I'm Sean Hood. Just a brief word of support for the proposed project at Mart South. I recently relocated my IT and financial services company from New York to downtown Los Angeles. A significant customer segment of ours is the fashion industry, to include a number of folks there in the California Market Center, which is really kind of a hotbed for this industry. I can tell you right now I'm missing some opportunities because, well, this area downtown lacks some of the hospitality options that are enjoyed elsewhere. It's a little quiet down there. We'd like to bring some business there. So, like I said, vicinity undeniably lacks hospitality options. Other areas, the area should enjoy the same economic and aesthetic revitalization enjoyed elsewhere downtown. I think the Mart South project is a step in the right direction and perhaps a catalyst for further investment in the neighborhood. Additionally, hey, it's an existing structure being repurposed.
Thank you.
That stuff. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Bonilla, and I work at 945 East 10th Street. I'm here in support of this project. This project is going to bring more jobs to the community, plus the fashion district and the downtown Los Angeles is going to have more security, more light around the area, plus a building that is innovated, upgraded, is going to beautify the city. And the reason why I'm in support of this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have a representative from Council District 14, Mr. Jones.
Mark Jones, CD14. Our office would just like to defer to planning's recommendation for this item.
Thank you so much. All right, so we have a recommendation from our department that the Council District 14 concurs with. So if there is no discussion on this item, I'll move that we deny the appeal. It's been seconded by Mr. Blumenthal. So without objection, we'll deny the appeal and sustain the Central Los Angeles APC determination in approving the categorical exemption and related CEQA findings for the adaptive reuse of an existing commercial building for the conversion, use, and maintenance of a hotel for the property located at 124 East Olympic Boulevard. Excellent. Can you confirm that this concludes our business, Mr. Mejia?
Yes, Councilman.
Excellent. We're adjourned.